been flying MiG-cap in North Vietnam. We shot down 2 MiG. On the 24th of July, I was flying number 2 in a flight of 4 when something came through the clouds I'd never seen before. It looked like a flying telephone pole with fins on it, a fiery tail, and before I could even press the mic button, it had detonated right under the formation.
They were Russian SAMs, guided by radar, and they usually hit.
Oh, Lord, I got tales that I can tell, oh, Lord, what it's like down in the hell, oh, Lord. I got tales that I can tell, I got tales that I can tell, oh, Lord.
We weren't really ready for a lot of what happened in the air over Vietnam. We'd spent the 50s building our strategic air forces. We could deliver nuclear weapons, but since we hadn't focused on our tactical forces, we weren't prepared for limited conflict. The Kennedy administration started rebuilding our tactical forces, and Vietnam was the first test. We met intimidating opposition, AAA anti-aircraft artillery, and Russian MiGs flown by the Vietnamese. But we managed to hold our own until they brought in the new Russian surface-to-air missiles. They found you and shot you down using radar, and you never knew they were there. It was a new world of warfare, called for new weapons, new will, and the wild weasel.
I have seen fire and thunder in the sky. I have known men who weren't afraid to die. I have seen men take eagle's wings and fly. I got tales that I can tell, oh Lord. Oh.
This is not the story of the Vietnam War or the politics that put us there. It's the story of industry and military joining together to meet a new and dangerous threat, of long and desperate hours of engineering, of long and frantic minutes in the range of deadly weapons, of violent maneuvers and perilous attacks, a story of sadness and anger, of dedication and courage, of skill and cunning. It's the story of the creation in crisis of a special Air Force mission, crucial then and now and in the future. Mostly, it's a story of people, told by those who were there.
We all got heavy damage, but number 4 was on fire and he had to eject. The backseater was killed. The aircraft commander spent 7.5 years in a PW camp. And on the way home, I was wondering how we were going to live in an environment, the skies of North Vietnam full of sand. But being fighter pilots, I knew we'd go back. It was just a matter of how many pilots we had to lose before we found out how to counter it.
The saying among some of the people in the Pentagon was that the North Vietnamese had established air superiority with ground-to-air missiles.
The loss of personnel at that time was probably the highest we ever had in the history of the Air Force.
I suppose it was a deficiency of tactical thinking that this hadn't been considered before. But there was an ability to react quickly.
Harold Brown authorized immediately the use of $1 million emergency funds, the highest priority that can be applied to any program in emergencies.
A specially appointed SAM task force immediately went to industry, seeking ideas for combating the Russian SAMs. They came up with a novel concept.
You want me to fly in the back of a little tiny fighter aircraft with a crazy fighter pilot who thinks he's invincible, home in on a SAM site in North Vietnam and shoot it before it shoots me? You gotta be shitting me.
I feel loneliness and fear and pain. I have seen brave and daring deeds insane. I have seen.
This was the birth of the Wild Weasel, a 2-seat F-100 Super Sabre designed to hunt down the SAM sites electronically and lead the attack on them. It was equipped with a special warning equipment to find the SAMs and a pilot in the front. This Wild Weasel was the first tactical fighter to use radar detection equipment to kill SAM sites. And it was the first mission to make an electronic warfare officer part of a fighter aircrew. We called them EWOs, and they played a critical role in the early development of this system. Yet the project was so classified that they knew nothing of their assignment until they arrived at the secret hangar.
The next morning early, an unmarked car picked us up and took us to Long Beach Airport, which is just a regular general aviation type airport. And there were some really ratty-looking Butler buildings off to the side, and they were well guarded, of course, but I mean, they were really run down and ratty. And we got in after our credentials were checked, and sure enough, inside there was an F-100 with its guts hanging out all over the place, and spaghetti wiring strung all over the place. But more important than that, I guess, there was air-conditioned hangars in there where North American Aviation had put about 30 of their very top aerospace engineers in it. Well, we met with those folks, and the next day we went to Palo Alto to meet with the officials of a small company called Applied Technology Incorporated at Palo Alto, and they made the boxes.
What we had developed was a series of black boxes that made up a system called radar homing and warning system. What it did basically was provide the air crew with indications of which direction threat radar signals were coming from.
This box was really a breakthrough because prior to the invention of this box, if you wanted to determine radar direction, you had to use a very large antenna on a very large airplane. And certainly there's no way to get a large antenna on a fighter aircraft. So Grigsby's people replaced that large antenna with 4 small antennas on a fighter.
Technical work went fast, and so did business. No one had time for contract formalities.
As we concluded our discussions, we decided we better get something down so that we'd know what it was we were talking about.
And so Air walked over to the blackboard and started writing quantities of items on the blackboard. And he says, "Now, Pierre, how much do you want?" And he says, "Well, let me write it down, I'll take it back." He says, "Never mind that, Pierre, get up here and sign your name." So everyone went to the blackboard and signed their name, and then they took a Polaroid picture of it, and that became the contract.
But the direction-finding set wasn't enough, and ATI developed several other boxes.
We had 3 boxes aboard the airplane, a set of boxes to tell when the radar was illuminating you and from what direction, a set of boxes to help you discriminate between multiple radars illuminating you, and a set of boxes to tell when a missile was being launched at you. These boxes were the forerunner of the Weasel system. They were built up in a very short order. They were primitive by today's standards. In fact, we had to cut and paste, cut sheet metal, rob and steal, and sometimes buy from the local electronics shop. But we put them together in 90 days and they worked.
Testing at Eglin proved these systems worked in the airplane, so the pilot EWO teams were brought together.
Well, we'd never seen the fighter pilots up close before, and all we knew is that they were trained to be aggressive and obnoxious, and they certainly didn't disappoint us.
The fighter pilots that were selected had about 2,000 hours total flying time. Flight leaders are highly qualified. They're extremely competent, and we're probably the world's best.
He wrote the words "world's greatest fighter pilot" on his visor, but he wrote it backwards, so when he looked in the mirror, it read correctly.
We weren't too happy about the team concept because fighter pilots are like gladiators. They like it one-on-one.
We was insistent on one thing for sure, and that was to be crewing up. We consider this very, very important, to be crewed up. And so we got together and drank martinis with the fighter pilots, and of course they were all crazy, and we were trying to determine how to crew up. And I guess after a few martinis, some magic process happened.
The mating process I still don't understand. We just were pulled towards each other, and that's how we were married up.
It was a chemistry thing because we had to have complete trust in each other.
I guess we needed those EWOs in the back seat because the fighter pilots weren't doing too good on their own. The SAMs were driving them down into the smaller arms fire, and everyone was hoping that this weapon system would work when we deployed it.
When we were ready to deploy, the Secretary of the Air Force, Harold Brown, came down, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the TAC Commander, and several other generals were here to visit us, and the purpose was to give us a pep talk. We were lined up along here, and the aircraft was parked over here.
I remember climbing up a ladder to look into the airplane and meeting some of the crews. I said to them that their mission was critical to the success of U.S. Air Force capabilities, and wished them good luck.
But it was not a rah-rah type talk. It was just do the best you can, and we're counting on you. someone remarked that the Chief of Staff of the Air Force was not present. And another astute individual remarked that he's in church praying for the success of the mission.
Bob Trier was standing next to me, and he said, he's talking like some of us aren't coming back. And I said, yeah, I know.
4 F-100Fs and 5 pilot EWO crews were deployed to Vietnam in complete secrecy. They arrived at Korat Air Base in Thailand on Thanksgiving Day 1965, just 89 days after the program began.
One of the first things I learned after landing at Korat is a good friend of mine had taken a SAM hit the day before. We wanted to put the hurt on those SAMs bad.
I have seen fire and thunder in the sky. I have known men who weren't afraid to die. I have seen men take eagle's wings and fly. I got tales that I can tell, oh Lord.
The Weasels were to lead F-105 attackers in on their wings. The Weasels would use their electronic equipment to hunt down the mobile SA-2 sites and then attack them with rockets. The F-105 thuds, carrying the heavy weapons, would follow them in to kill the site. This mission was called Hunter-Killer.
We had to figure out our own tactics based on what little we knew about the SA-2 system. We knew that its range was about 15 to 20 miles. We knew that it had a target tracking radar, and we would use that to home in on it and find it, because they were usually camouflaged. We knew that we could survive at low level, and by using terrain masking, that we could pop up, get our readings, and then attack the site, hopefully without getting killed.
The Weasels' second role was to protect the strike force during their regular missions. The Weasels would warn them of nearby SAMs and keep the sites busy while the strikers zeroed in on their target.
The Weasels would orbit in the target area from 20 minutes up to 40 minutes, exposed to all of the AAA in the fire. This created a high fatality rate for the Wild Weasel mission. We were always the first in and the last out.
The first 2 weeks were discouraging. The Weasels were floundering and heads were shaking. The Weasels lost an airplane and crew before they got a SAM site.
Bob Trier and I stayed up late one night just talking about life in general and talking about being a POW if we were shot down, and we both decided and talked about that we could not survive as a POW, and that if we went down, we were either going to shoot our way out and walk out or take a bunch of them with us. And that was a couple of days before Bob was shot down. And John Pitchard punched out and had hit the ground, and he heard a lot of gunfire about a quarter of a mile away where Bob was. And when John Pitchard surrendered, they shot him in the arm, and he was laying on the cell floor the next day, and a Vietnamese lieutenant came in and kicked him. And he said, "Your co-pilot created great sorrow yesterday." So I know that Bob took a bunch of them with him even after he was on the ground, and he kind of set the stage for the EWOs and the standard that all the Weasels followed, that even when you hit the ground, you don't stop.
I have felt pity deep within my heart. I have seen mother's sons blown apart. I have seen Satan's wicked fiery darts. I got tales that I can tell, oh Lord.
Well, that was December 20th, and of course, people were pretty worried about the program at that time, and I think the program almost got canceled. But then on December 22nd, we had our first successful mission, and boy, was that sweet.
We picked a SAM up, and I was running against him and dropping down in the valleys and using the hills for masking. I'd pop up, roll the wings level, Jack would get a reading, and I'd dip back down in the valley. We kept doing this, and I kept keeping the SAM at 10 and 11 o'clock so he wouldn't think I was heading directly towards him.
And the signal got so strong that I'm sure we were out of ridges. We were going to be out of ridges. So I said to Al, and he said, "I've got it." And instead of going over the last ridge, he went to the right down a little valley. And
we broke out in the Red River Delta. I popped up to the left. I had the strobes going off to the left of the scope. I rolled inverted, and I saw him.
So Al fired both rocket canisters and hit one of the launchers. And then he yelled to the thuds on UHF radio and called out where the site was.
Finally, one of them says, "I got it, I got it, I got it." And I saw lead roll in, and as he was coming down to shoot, I saw him firing, and everything started lighting up.
But you have to get to the radar, and we knew we hadn't gotten it because it was heavily camouflaged.
I was still coming back around for a second pass when I finally picked up the band. It was highly camouflaged, and I was way out of range, but I just started strafing, and I just walked. the rounds up to it, and the right side of the van started lighting up, and he went off the air at that time.
Here's this SAC kid in an F-100 leading a V formation, a victory formation of F-105s over Carrot in the middle of the Bob Hope show. That was a signal to people at the show that we'd had a success, and by the time we got to the club, the party was already in full bloom.
And one reason it was such a good celebration that we knew we had the SAM. We knew now that, yeah, baby, every time you turn that SAM on, your hand may tremble because there may be a weasel coming right down your throat. We had a wild party.
And Gary Willard, our commander, sent out a message to the Pentagon saying, sighted SAM, destroyed SAM, and very original, as you know. And there was a lot of celebrating in the Pentagon that day.
The success was publicized, but not who did it or that the site was found electronically. The Weasel mission was still highly classified, but now the air crews in Southeast Asia saw that it was a concept that worked. But there was a price, a high price. It was one of the most dangerous missions in the Air Force at that time. The Weasels lost 5 out of the 7 F-100Fs deployed. When death seems that close, you can't help but wonder if you'll see the next day dawn.
Can you say, will the sun rise tomorrow? Will there be any time left to borrow? Will the poet make a rhyme? Will there be any time? Can you say, will there be a tomorrow?
I never met a weasel that didn't like what he did. I also never met a weasel that wasn't scared to death while they were doing it.
Crush your bills just before takeoff, and you had a queasy stomach, but you learn to control the fear and just do your job.
The only one that knows how truly afraid you are, your laundress. And that's true. You get scared, but there's no big deal. You're busy.
The pressure could get to you, I guess, if you didn't let it off. Heck, they were nice. The guy would come riding a motorcycle right through the bar yelling his head off just to forget the day he had.
We were in a stress situation. We worked hard. We worked hard towards a common objective. People were being shot at. Some were being killed. Working towards that common objective, we all became close.
There was a togetherness that existed between, especially between the pilots and the EWs. There was a lot of harassment, a lot of jokes, but there was really a cohesiveness, a togetherness that never existed anyplace else I've ever seen in the Air Force. That cohesiveness, that two-man team concept, just kind of rippled out into everything else, all the way into industry. We felt part of the team. We were members. We belonged.
We were friends, and I'd stand on that line frequently waiting for these people to come back, waiting for my friends to come back, and they didn't return.
Seems to me I have been here forever. Will this war ever end? Maybe never. Will the dawn still arrive? Will I still be alive? Or will I sleep alone forever?
The Weasels had a saying that we flew and fought so that our buddies could live over the skies of North Vietnam. We didn't really think about the political aspects and the world opinion of the war. The only thing we were concerned about was that they all came back home.
We really lived together. Everybody depended upon each other, military, industry. You had a job to do, and you did it, because if something didn't work, somebody died.
Those systems were really worked. They were really checked. The maintenance crews worked on those things like you wouldn't believe. They stole parts where necessary. They made them work, and they checked them before every flight. We knew guys' lives were hanging on those systems, and we made damn sure they were good systems and they'd come back with those systems still working.
Many of us went 100 missions with no equipment failure or only partial failure, and that kind of became a trademark of the Weasel Keepers.
You have to remember, we were developing tactics and systems at the same time. No one had a pat tactic for killing SAMs without getting killed. We were doing things by the seat of our pants. It was a very fluid situation. We had no documentation. We made changes in the airplane. We made changes in the equipment. We made changes in tactics.
But the tactics were often frustrated due to the mismatch between the F-100 Weasels and the 105s they escorted. After a few months, the squadron sent a message to the Pentagon explaining
that 105 strike aircraft was much faster. And while Weasel 100s had to use the afterburners, which ate up the fuel, reduced his range and time on target to support the strike aircraft.
Of course, every time 105s got scared, they'd smoke off at 600 knots, and the poor old F-100s couldn't keep up. So it'd be one solo Weasel and 4 thuds gone, right? So they decided they needed a little something more compatible.
the Pentagon moved fast. They outfitted the 105F, a 2-seat Thud, with Weasel gear and added the Shrike missile, a missile that would home in on the enemy radar. The Weasels still couldn't shoot from outside the range of the SAMs, but at least they could get away from the AAA guarding the sites. By the late spring of 1966, about a dozen F-105F Weasels had joined the squadrons in Thailand, at Korat and Tak Lee. The 105s were a more capable weapon system, but no one knew quite how to use them. And at first, many were lost.
I'm a Thud pilot. I love my plane. It is my body. I am its brain. She's packed with transistors, black boxes, diodes. But stay alert, because you might get hurt when she explodes.
We really didn't have any experience to build on. We were still wonder what works, because out of the first 6 Thuds that went to Weasels that went to Tak Lee, 6 weeks after they got there was one left.
It was partly due to our inexperience. Learning against a system that's as lethal as the Soviet SAM systems is pretty risky business, and the weather played a big factor too. Ed Larson and I went chasing a SAM site north of Hanoi, and we fired a Shrike at it, and it in turn fired at us. We were in and out of the clouds. We dodged 2 of the missiles, and then the third one came at us right out of cloud bank that was about 100 yards ahead, and we had nothing to do but sit there and wait for the explosion. The missile blew the nose off the aircraft, and we went out over the coast about another minute and a half, and the controls were gone completely, so we bailed out after saying very brave things to each other, much braver than I'm sure we felt, like, hey, see you later, and good luck, and see you in the water, and that sort of thing. And just as soon as we got under our canopy, maybe about a minute later, as the aircraft was spiraling down and exploded. So obviously there was a fire in there that we were unaware of, and maybe we were more fortunate than many. Many didn't make it back at all.
Just go on down to Banana Valley. Go on down and meet your fate. Just go on down to Banana Valley. But when you go down, 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 you better learn to hate.
A Thud pilot from Tak Lee got hit and went down in a small village outside of Than Hoa. During the ejection, evidently he lost his pistol or sidearm. And after he hit the ground, he was talking to the members of his flight who were circling overhead and says, "Here come the natives," and they looked teed off. Well, the natives clubbed him and beat him to death and then hung his body up. We stayed up for a couple of days, and then they took it down and buried it or either threw it away. Tak Lee wanted to come back and bomb the village off the face of the earth, but they couldn't get permission.
When you go down, 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 you better learn to hate.
We lost a lot of airplanes because we could not fly and fight the way we thought we should up there. There were a tremendous amount of restrictions on us on what we could do and not do in the skies of North Vietnam.
We flew past airfields every day and saw the MiGs sitting down there or taxiing out for takeoff, but we weren't allowed to hit them.
I got madder than hell one day. I saw an intelligence photograph of a loading area near Hai Phong with about 170 missile canisters sitting there, and a real fantastic target, but we weren't allowed to hit it. We had to wait and take those missiles on one at a time as they came at us in the air.
We should never again ask men to die if we're not going to give them a chance to win.
We took a lot of losses, but the madder you get, the more you want to win, and we were learning how to win. but it takes more than anger.
Being a weasel was a whole lot like a three-dimensional chess in which cheating's legal.
What's that telltale wisp I see? That's a contrail pulled by a fish fed sea. The cards are stacked and it looks like time to deal. The lead's got bandits, 12 o'clock high. Let's spin it around and scramble for sky and arm your guns. This ain't no game, it's real.
And the pieces weren't kings and pawns, but missiles and guns. And you couldn't study the board before making your move. The equipment worked well as far as it went, but it could only give the Weasels a general idea of the direction of a threatening SAM site, and almost no sense of the distance.
So the only way to get an exact sighting on that SAM site was to visually acquire it, and to do that, we'd go in high enough, we called it trolling, to make sure they'd shoot at us, then dodge the missiles, take it down, so to speak, then we could go in and find the SAM site from the smoke.
You got them? Okay, I've got a good launch. Sam, got a visual. Down.
So you dive, and the missile comes down with you. At the last moment, you pull up. The missile's going about Mach 3, and there's no way it can turn with you.
So once we know and have pinpointed the SAM site, now we know where to launch the Shrike, and the Shrike homes in on the radar of the SAM site.
There were a good many times that just by going through the profile that we'd have to go through to fire a Shrike, that we could actually intimidate the SAM site and make him go down.
That's the whole idea of Weasel. Scare the hell out of them for a change.
And whatever it took to get them to shut down was what we were after, because it gave the strike flight enough time to get in, drop their bombs, and get out of there. Of course, the ultimate answer was to destroy the site so that we didn't have to bother with them the next day. The trouble with the Shrike is that its range is only about half that of the SAM. So I got thinking there must be some way we could improve our ordnance in that Shrike. And so we came up with the idea of pulling the nose of the airplane up 45 degrees and lobbing it, tossing it like a basketball into a basket. And sure enough, all that was free distance. Then it would still seek it out, and that allowed us to outgun them. We could shoot farther than they could. We finally got permission to try that system, and we fired 6 Shrikes, and we killed 5 Fansongs, radar sites.
The Weasels were getting very clever, but the enemy was getting smart too, learning how to play this deadly game.
Standard rule was if you did the same thing 2 days in a row, they're probably going to kill you the second day.
It was people against people. I can remember stories on the aircrew's debriefing that they could tell when they were flying against the same operators on the ground that they flew against 2 or 3 days ago. And it was a matter of matching the skill and cunning of the aircrew versus the skill and cunning of the ground crew.
You had a very, very healthy respect for your adversaries because they were very good at what they did.
They knew the Weasels could evade missiles from one site, and maybe even 2, but a third would catch them with little airspeed and less maneuverability.
I'll never forget my first Group Pac 6 mission. We came in feet wet, just north of Haiphong, turned to the north to go up towards the Kepa Valley, and just as soon as we got on station, it seemed like whole hell broke loose. We had SAMs from 3 or 4 different locations at the same time, multiple coordinated firings, AAA all over the place. Heck, I was so busy just trying to survive, I didn't know where I was or what I was doing.
Back then, when we were getting it from all sides, you didn't know which SAM site was launching at you, so you didn't know which way to look for the missile. And even if you didn't know if the missile was aimed at you. You could be dodging a missile that was intended for your wingman, and in the meantime, seeing another one that was coming right at you.
The evolution of the equipment was driven by the threat. We were involved in gamesmanship and technology as well as tactics.
There was a sergeant at Tok Lee named Weldon Bauman, and he figured out a way to indicate on our scope which site was launching. So now we knew which way to look for the missile. Then there was his fighter pilot, Major Bob Kleimek at Eglin, who came up with a device that said, "You are the one being shot at."
The game continued. Now the North Vietnamese started using radars outside the frequency range of our equipment. So the new F-105G Weasel had a much broader frequency range and a new missile that could really challenge the SAMs.
Had a bigger warhead, went faster, went farther, and you could program a turn into it. I'll never forget the first night I used one of those AGM-78s. Fired against the SAM radar, and when it came off the rail, not only did it sound like a freight train, the whole world lit up like the sun in front of our eyes. We saw the missile go on out towards the radar site, down towards it, and then when it detonated, warhead blew up and took along a whole bunch of SAMs, with those SAMs just snaking all around the ground.
Now we have standoff capability. We're shooting him from some distance away. Suddenly, somebody gets blown away and the Weasels aren't even in the area. See, the Weasels are still 30 miles away.
By the time our forces stopped going north in 1969, the Weasels' success rate had become impressive.
And we had the best we could determine from photography that we had killed 97 SAM sites. The wild Weasels had killed 97 SAM sites.
And the loss rate to SAMs had been cut way down. The Weasel mission was a success. There were many heroes, and some could finally be recognized.
My airplane was 301, which is a rather famous weasel bird. Wound up that 4 MiG-17s were shot down by wild weasels. All of them were shot down by 301. 27 SAM sites were killed by 301. And it's got more medals hanging on it and everything you ever saw. And the only good part about it is that 301 never got anybody a Purple Heart.
On March 10, 1967, Captains Merlin H. Dethlefsen and Kevin A. Gilroy, better known as Mike, streaked through a hail of flak to destroy a SAM battery protecting the Thai Nguyen Steelworks. Prior to eliminating the site, they had survived 2 MiG attacks and several anti-aircraft artillery hits on the fuselage of their F-105F Weasel aircraft. But they pressed on with skill and with courage to bring the crippled Thud home to fight again. For conspicuous, extraordinary, and sustained heroism, we hereby award Captain Dethlefsen the Congressional Medal of Honor and Captain Mike Gilroy the Air Force Cross.
On April 19, 1967, Major Leo K. Thorsness and Captain Harold E. Johnson attacked 2 SAM sites through heavy defensive fire that downed their wingman. They went on to down a MiG, damage another, and then participate in a rescue effort, protecting the rescue aircraft from MiGs. They flew home on fumes. Captain Harold E. Johnson is awarded the Air Force Cross, and the Congressional Medal of Honor is awarded to Major Leo K. Thorsness for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of their lives above and beyond the call of duty.
There were many acts of heroism and many heroes. The Thud Weasels had written their names in the skies over North Vietnam, but the Thuds were getting old, and when we went north again in 1972, the Thud Weasels were accompanied by a new Phantom Weasel, the F-4C. It was first used in Linebacker 2. Linebacker 2 was our last big thrust north, designed to put North Vietnam on its knees. It was December of 1972, and to those who flew the missions, it will always be the 12 days of Christmas.
The strike package we put into the air the first night of Linebacker 2 was awesome. We put everything we could get into the air. We had over 135 B-52s, 200 plus fighters, support package of tankers, EB-66s, EC-121s, everything we could get. It was the biggest guerrilla since World War II.
I can remember that there must have been close to 350 airplanes up there at any one time, and they had to be over the target for an hour and 40 minutes coming in and out of their initial points.
How in the hell do you cover 27 SAM sites for an hour and 40 minutes with 35 Weasels? And that's all we had. The F-4s plus the 2 105 squadrons was 35 total. If anybody had told me in pilot training I'd be going downtown Hanoi at night with 2 bullets to cover 5 SAM sites for 20 minutes, I'd have probably turned in my wings right then. So we did it. We would try to get between the SAM site and the B-52, turn into the site, try to threaten it, make them come up on us instead of the B-52 and take our best shot.
We found that the North Vietnamese had developed some new tactics. One of those tactics was to fire the missile off in the general direction of the airplane, and then at the last minute turn the tracking radar on to provide correction. This was very effective because we couldn't counter it. Also, they brought in new radars that operated outside of our receiver frequency band, and this was very effective too because we just couldn't pick the signals up.
The weather was solid undercast with a full moon. It was like working on a spotlight all night. And the only way you could tell you're over the target was with your inertial nav system, or see the flashes of the bombs going off underneath the clouds, or the flashes of the SAMs as they came up. you could see silhouettes of airplanes at extremely long ranges, and you'd see these ghostly-looking airplanes come by at 500 knots and then disappear into the gloom. And the whole scene just led a unreal, eerie presence to the first couple of days of Linebacker 2.
It was very upsetting because our job was to protect the B-52. We were supposed to make sure that they got to their target and got home safely. And because we weren't picking up the signals the way we should have, we would be sitting there and watching the missiles lifting off and tracking on the B-52s and not able to do anything about it. And if you can imagine a SAM missile tracking a B-52 in the middle of the night and burying itself in the bomb bay and watching that huge airplane explode and seeing pieces of the wing and fuselage spinning off into space and realizing that 6 lives were gone just like that.
Will the dawn still arrive? Will I still be alive? Or will I sleep alone here forever?
We changed our tactics again and had the B-52s go after the missile sites, and that combined with the fact that the North Vietnamese just flat ran out of missiles brought them to their knees. The last 5 days, we never had a shot fired at us.
Linebacker 2 was a major success, a team effort that brought the North Vietnamese to the peace table. And despite our difficulty with the new SAM capabilities, the Weasels played a large part in that success.
Throughout Linebacker 2, morale was very high. I've never been more proud of being in the United States Air Force. It's hard to describe the bravery, the camaraderie, the threats that these guys faced daily. It was incredible. Some of the most difficult flying you can imagine. The night, the weather, SAMs, MiGs, the constant threat of dying, and yet we lived through it all. We'd come back from missions and gather around the Oak Club and throw about $5 worth of quarters in the jukebox, and we only played one song. The squadron had adopted Roberta Flack's "The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face." As Linebacker 2 progressed, the rallying cry became "Bring home the POWs." And when the ceasefire finally came, and I remember we were sitting around the television sets watching the POWs walk across the ramp in Hanoi and get on the 141s and lift off. They're free. It was a great emotional release. These same guys that had, on a daily basis, had risked their life so unselfishly and given their utmost to make the mission come off to accomplish what we were trying to do were emotionally drained. You could look around the crowd and they were openly weeping. And to see the prisoners walking across the ramp, that was worth everything we had done.
The first time ever I saw your face, your face, your face.
The 6 years that I spent in prison really weren't wasted. I had the opportunity to view communism from the very bowels of a prison system. The guards, in the main, I felt sorry for those people. I pitied them, except for a couple who were professional torturers. They enjoyed mutilating you, it seemed like. One of the things they forced us to do was we had to make a 90-degree bow every time the door opened and closed. And once in a while, you'd get your courage mustered up and you'd have enough in you to refuse to bow just to prove that you still had some pride been some resistance left. You knew it was an automatic beating. You knew you'd bow again in 10 minutes. But this day I decided to do that. The door opened. I looked the guard in the eye, and all of a sudden this fear I had, well, as I waited for the other guards to get there for the beating, was replaced for pity for that man. And I thought, you poor soul. Here you are, the free man, and I'm the prisoner, and yet if you live to be 150 years old, you will never experience even a tenth of what I did as a free man for 35 years as an American. And by the way, I got my beating. While I was in prison, I learned a lot about myself. I found men who were stronger than I am. I also found men who were weaker than I am. I also learned survival in prison, but that was also part of my being a wild weasel pilot. We were doing something as weasel pilots, as weasel crews, that had never been done before. There wasn't such a mission.
Home. We are going home. Sand and sun, desert and mountain, our children, our women. This one most beautiful thought underlies all the mundane procedures. A long rumbling scream, gear up, flaps up, we are homeward bound.
The Vietnam War was over, and the country began to regroup. But the Weasels barely took a breath. They knew that Vietnam was only the beginning of a long fight to keep ahead of Soviet SAM technology. And during linebacker, we'd slipped behind. Without the motivation of war, of having to face those SAMs every day, takes real commitment to keep the push on.
We knew what we needed, even back in '66, and Rick Morgan and myself and some other guys wrote a rock, and then we took it from desk to desk, convincing general after general that we really needed this stuff.
You've got to have champions to get things done in the Air Force, and these guys were real fanatics. They were real fanatics because they'd been shot at in combat.
So Systems Command says, you're not giving us any alternative. And we say, you got that right, sweetie. We have to fly this stuff, and we have to take it to combat, and we're not going with anything less.
The lessons learned in combat weren't lost. We'd learned what kind of equipment and tactics worked against the SAMs, and we'd learned that it took a team to make the mission a success. The flyers, the maintenance people, the Air Force engineers, and the contractors. So some of the champions were the people who brought this team together at George Air Force Base and made it work like it did in war.
In wartime, the contractors lived with us. They were there to support us, and there was an overall motivating factor of the guy you were working with may come back the next time because of what you did. And that motivation factor is missing in peacetime. That's what we're trying to foster, and it takes a lot of trust and a lot of work with each other. What we try and do, we live together, we play together, and we drink together, and we make it happen. And that's one of the beauties of the Weasel community, that we make it happen.
And they made it happen. They built a system that some said couldn't be done. It took Mac Air of McDonnell Douglas, who had built the F-4 Phantom, and it took Texas Instruments, IBM, and Loral, all working together to build the APR-38. They used digital processor technology, originally developed by Dalmo Victor, and the BDM Corporation helped the Air Force test and evaluate this new system. Then it took veteran Weasels to make sure it was combat ready. Often they had to be very resourceful.
The original software delivered with the F4G was based on 4-year-old threat data. In order to update that so we could go to war with it, we needed to bring in a logistics command software engineer. What we did is we shanghaied one of their engineers and brought him out to George so that he could work with us. This guy, Jim Hundley, a little sawed-off runt with bright red hair and a beard, was just what the Weasel needed at that time. And in order to get Jim Hundley more involved in what our problems were, we actually took him up in the airplane and flew with him.
I had one flight in the F4G, and during that time we were doing a gold key run, and my pilot yelled, hit the gold key switch. Well, the guy was pulling 3 Gs. I couldn't touch the switch, or however many Gs he was pulling. Airbags were going up around me. I just physically couldn't reach my hand up to touch the switch. When I got back, I started changing some of those switch functions and make them just one switch function. There's things like it was a 2-ship mission. The pilot kept saying, oh, where's number 2? And I'd look to the left, and I'd look to the right, and I don't see him. He says, well, you're supposed to be looking for him. Know where he is. You can't do that and look at the scope at the same time. When we test this stuff on the bench or in the lab, that's all we do is we have this one little set of avionics we play with. We don't worry about making the airplane do what it has to do in the sky. That ride did a lot to say that, hey, there's other things in that back seat to do other than play with your APR-38, Jim Hundley.
Whatever it took to make it work in combat, that's what they did. And whoever it took, they got. They brought in a test team made up of a detachment from the Tactical Air Warfare Center, Air Force engineers, and contractors. They stationed them at George, where they could share planes, maintenance, ideas, and problems with the Weasel squadrons.
Well, there were the battles and there were the champions. There was a personal commitment by many people in the military and many people in the civilian world. I think this commitment was primarily the challenge of developing a system that couldn't be done.
The APR-38 was the most complex system ever to go in a fighter. It was a radar warning and homing receiver that could locate and identify enemy systems from great distances and with astonishing accuracy. It would then tell the missiles exactly where to go.
The crews would come back from missions with stories about how quickly they could, with just the push of a few buttons, designate an enemy radar system, hand that information off or electronically talk to the missiles that we were carrying, and then complete an attack on that system in a matter of a few seconds.
This was the core of the new advanced Wild Weasel, the Weasel of the future. Since it was software-based, it could constantly be updated to meet new threats, whatever new types of radar emitters the Soviets could devise. And it could be interfaced with many new software-controlled systems, like the new high-speed anti-radiation missile, the HARM.
We've always had an exceptional system in the APR-38. Its receiver has the capability of seeing targets at very long distances and plotting them very accurately. The only problem in the past was we always had to get in very close to the enemy in order to utilize our missiles. Now, when we bring in the capability of the HARM, which is a long-range missile, we now have a system that can shoot at the enemy outside of the enemy radar's range.
We went from a Colt Saturday Night Special to a Magnum, and it's proven out. If we can attack from outside lethal range, we're not forced, like we were in Southeast Asia, to end up strafing SAM sites or getting in there with a Shrike eyeball to eyeball.
So this new capability opened up all sorts of new tactical possibilities.
The big benefit that we have at George is that we can interface between the test team and the operational squadron to develop a baseline for the best tactics.
The TALK Det 5 people operate right out of my squadron. You know, they fly out of my squadron. They get their jets from my duty desk. Their maintenance is my maintenance. We sit down and talk about things over coffee at the coffee bar continually, and then move on down to the bar after work and talk about things there. This capability, that capability. One of those, what we really need is, and you lay something out and you can see the wheels start turning on. Next thing you know, that's incorporated in some form.
We focus on the current day threat, what's really going on in the world. We have to be ready at any time to deploy and to go to war. So when the threat changes or when new tactics are required, we in fact develop those.
And the reason that interchange between development, testing, and tactics is so important is that weaseling is still a very unique mission.
Whereas strike aircraft or attack aircraft have a known target, one thing that they're supposed to do when they take off, they know that before they ever go to their airplane. The Wild Weasel doesn't know that. He has to look all over the battle area. He has to detect threats, collate intelligence information that he has available to him in the airplane, real time, select what he feels are the priority targets, and then suppress or destroy those targets based on his own decision process and his own available information from the APR-38. It takes very special equipment and very special people. That's why we demand the best, we've got to have the best, and we get the best.
Well, I'd rather be an F4 jock than the Air Force Chief of Staff. One good reason I ain't got the rank right here, you're supposed to laugh. It's a lot more fun just dropping bombs and hassling 2 on 2. So I'll just stick to my gunnery range and fly in the Phantom 2.
I'm a part of a very special and limited force. I kind of like to think that I've got a bounty on my head as far as the Soviets go, because we are a force that they don't have.
With one aircraft and one air crew, I can do more to disrupt the enemy than probably a lot of other aircraft.
We know our equipment very well. We know the threat extremely well, and therefore we feel very confident as we do our work.
Just make me an F4 jock.
We do get some of the most experienced pilots and backseaters, EWOs, into the Weasel squadrons, but most of them haven't had combat experience, and that does make a big difference.
When you get shot at, you get a whole new perspective. It's like a veil's been lifted from your eyes and you can see everything very clearly. We're trying to make our current training as much like combat as possible. We try to impress upon our people that if they don't do things exactly right, then somebody can get killed.
Simulators give crews practice against complex threats you can't set up on a range. So Singer Link developed a simulator that provides realistic threat scenarios, the types the Weasels would actually see in Eastern Europe, and they keep it current with the airplane. Regular sorties at George give the crews range experience.
But you don't operate the Weasel in a vacuum. You know, it's part of an Air Force team. Our tactics have to be integrated with other Air Force tactics. And that really is the job of Red Flag and Green Flag.
Red Flag and Green Flag are coordinated exercises developed to simulate combat as closely as possible. They bring together all the various elements of the Air Force: reconnaissance, intelligence, jamming, defense suppression, the CAP, and the attack force. And they're all integrated into realistic missions against a real live opponent, Air Force specialists trained in Soviet tactics. It's real, it's dynamic. Combat decisions are made every moment.
It's almost like in Southeast Asia, where you've got an enemy on the ground, you've got an enemy in the air, and they're really good, and they're out to get you.
But he knows what it's like in Southeast Asia. Obviously, I wasn't there, so I don't have that benefit. But you get a feel for it first time you get up on the tanker. You can tell then that you're part of a bigger package. That all this thing you've talked about, things you've trained for all the time, you have a responsibility there. You start to listen.
Listen to the radios. Who's there, who isn't there? How is it going to change my plan? You've got to be on top of everything mentally. You've got to know where you are. You've got to know where the ground is. You've got to know where all of the other players are in order to do it. And while you're doing this, all the mental gyrations that you're going through to keep everything in track, you're also under a lot of physical strain. You're pulling 4 and 5 Gs. Sometimes, you know, the sweat, yeah, or more. Sometimes the sweat is so bad on a hot day out there that on my glasses, it's like looking through a wet windshield, and yet you've got to press on because you're already dodging MiGs or SAMs, and you're doing all this, and then bang, the next thing you know, geez, you're in the target area.
There's more people starting to talk on the radio. It gets a little more confusing. Who's talking to who really said what? Did they mean that?
You've got to make an attack of some sort or another. I'm looking in the airplane, I'm looking back outside, I come back in, I designate a target, I tell John what target I've got designated, I'm back out the other side. He's checking his switches.
Checking switches, finding out where the wingman is, listening to where the guys are that we're supposed to be supporting, listening for code words. Put all of those together and you say, well, have I got the right target? Have I got the right switches? I'm in the right place. Do I have the right time?
The machine's giving me the information I need. And boom, John, come hard left, pull 30, and we're in our attack. And the next thing I hear from him, you know, is
shotgun.
Shotgun.
You come back and you feel good. You're tired, but it's a good, tired feeling. And you know that because of this, that if you had to, you could go to combat and you're ready.
In fact, that's the whole concept behind Red Flag. We found after the war in Southeast Asia that most of the guys that got shot down in their first 10 missions or so. So what we're trying to do at Red Flag is to give them the intense training that they need to get over that 10-mission hump, to make the mistakes that they would normally make in those first 10 missions. Make them at Nellis, don't make them in combat.
Sing the Red River Rats battle hymn. Hold your head high, stand tall, you are men. Never run from a fight, be prepared day and night. Sing the Red River Rats battle hymn.
The Wild Weasel mission began in crisis, a response to a new type of warfare that continues to challenge us now and will as far as we can see into the future. The Weasel community has devoted the post-war years to developing one of the most sophisticated weapon systems in the U.S. military inventory, and air crews better trained than ever before. But is it enough? Some people say we can't keep up with a country that pours twice as much as we do into developing its weapon systems. Intelligence experts estimate that there are about 10,000 SAM launchers at over 900 sites, including many new generations of SAMs we've never encountered.
Well, the threat in Central Europe is awesome. There's no doubt about that. But can we meet it? Yes. This a lot of people in the Washington area especially that enjoy drawing pictures of this magnificent red line of the communist nations and put one wild weasel airplane every 30 miles along that line, and they like to point out we've only got 100 and so many wild weasels. How can we possibly cover all that area? But that's not how we employ weasels in the first place. You don't try to take on the entire enemy all at once, all up and down the line. Our primary job is really to suppress or to knock holes through specific areas in this big red line that they draw so that the attack airplanes can go do their job. So we would mass our force to actually do that. Is it a lethal job? Will it be dangerous? Yes. Will we be exposed to a lot of things? Yes. Can we do the job? You betcha.
Today's wars are fought on the technological front. It's a real cat and mouse game between ourselves and the Russians. We're going to have to improve our APR-38 because of some changes that the Russians have made in their equipment. We're going to do that through a performance update program, what we call a PUP. There are two things that PUP program is going to do for us. It's going to give us a new computer, and it's also going to give us a directional receiver group. The enhancements of those two items in the APR-38 is going to give us the capability to process the new exotic emitters that the Russians keep throwing at us.
Now, once you have this technology, then I think you have to look at the airframe you put it into. Now, presently, the F-4G is doing just a super job, but it's an airplane that's been around for a long time, and if you look at the other aircraft that are going to be the main strikers, it might be better if we had a better match. And
either the F-16E or the F-15E, and I would assume that we'll look very hard at those two airplanes. Beyond that, of course, we've got some other advanced technologies that we're looking at up at Wright-Patterson right now.
For instance, there are threats today that we're continuing to address and work on. Examples would be the IR threat, the millimeter wave threat, electro-optic threat, and any other threats they may come up with.
We're continuing to broaden the base of the defense suppression program. We brought the EF-111 jamming aircraft on board. Our tactical fighters are carrying a lot more electronic combat equipment than they used to carry. They have jamming pods, passive warning receivers, chaff and flare dispensers.
One of the ways that we in industry are looking at helping the Weasel meet the threat of the future is to take some of the technology that we developed, the APR-38 for instance, take its receiver technology and integrate it into the fighter of the future to give the guy that's flying a better chance to locate the threat that's trying to kill him. Also, when he meets that SAM eyeball to eyeball, we need to give him something to protect himself with, and a form of an anti-radiation missile like the HARM missile, only in a much smaller package with a much more simple concept, might give him the capability of fighting his way out of that problem and surviving to go on to his target.
But all that having been said, the Wild Weasel aircraft and the Wild Weasel aircrew are going to remain, at least for the foreseeable future, our #1 defense suppression asset and our #1 radar killer.
It takes a unique blend of flying skill and intelligence to be able to do that mission well, and I feel confident that we're putting out those kinds of crews who can do just that.
To do it with the SAMs, it's incredible, the feeling that you get and the responsibility that you have, but we go in there and we do the job well.
Today, and it will be in the future, it's one hell of a mission.
The Weasel's mission is first in, last out.
Tales that I can tell, oh Lord, what it's like down in the hell, oh Lord. I got tales that I can tell, I got tales that I can tell, oh Lord. I know what it's like to sit and wait, I know misery of unknown fate, don't know whether I'll come back today. I got tales that I can tell, oh Lord, oh Lord. I feel loneliness loneliness and fear and pain I've seen. Brave and daring deeds insane I've seen. Blood flow but not in vain. I got tales that I can tell, oh Lord, oh Lord. I've seen fire and thunder in the sky. I've known men who weren't afraid to die. I've seen men take eagle's wings and fly. I got tales that I can tell, oh Lord,